Listen to Karen. Turns out it was a hit on Foggy.
No duh.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Colton Ogburn, and we need to talk about Daredevil Born Again. The finale has come and gone, and it's pretty great, but unfortunately, the show itself and a lot of what happened between this and this, it was honestly a huge mess, and most of the series had me feeling like
This all feels fake.
So I'm going to explain all the behind the scenes drama that led to this show feeling so uneven and wonky, and why for me it doesn't quite live up to the original, but simultaneously how I do still think that this is one of the greater shows that Marvel Studios has produced. And I'll tell you why I am super optimistic for Born Again Season 2 and why I have a feeling that it might end up being the greatest season of Daredevil ever. A little later I'll be joined by my friends Lee Mazzio and Ethan Ng to get their thoughts on this finale and the series overall. But first, let me explain where I'm coming from. So the original Daredevil series, to me, it is a masterclass in how great TV can be. The quality and attention to detail that this series had on all fronts was just top tier filmmaking. The writing, the set design, the acting, it was all dialed in perfectly. And I want to be clear that I did actually rewatch the original Daredevil series recently, so this isn't just me having like these nostalgic memories. The show really is like still great in my opinion. Those first 3 seasons, the first 2 especially. And with that show being so top tier, it always perplexed me as to why the greater MCU, which was under the Marvel Studios banner, didn't just embrace this show as canon to the MCU. Now, of course, I do know that the real reason is that while the MCU was under Marvel Studios, the Daredevil show was actually under Marvel Entertainment, which was ran by Perlmutter, and he and Kevin Feige did not really get along at all. And so the crossover between the two was pretty much dead on arrival. And I'll admit that as much as I do love the original series, I totally understand why Kevin Feige didn't want to incorporate a show that he had no control over into his universe, especially considering that Perlmutter, the guy that did have ultimate say over it, they just didn't work well together, so it could have been a disaster. Luckily, however, the actual creators behind the show did do a decent job at making their show work within the confines of the MCU. And following this Netflix universe of Marvel characters, or the Defenders verse if you will, going on a bit of a hiatus, we luckily wound up in a situation years later where Kevin Feige did decide to embrace that show and the love that the fans had for it, and he ultimately decided to bring it into the MCU. Seeing Matt Murdock in Spider-Man No Way Home for me was just as huge for me as seeing Tobey and Andrew pop up. I was so glad that they were bringing Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio back into the fold, but what I didn't like was how
Fake.
it all felt, especially once we got into Hawkeye. I loved seeing D'Onofrio's Kingpin in that show, but it just felt weird and out of place at times. Something felt off, and they kind of corrected that a little bit with Echo, and Matt's role in She-Hulk wasn't all that bad. It's still funny as hell.
Morning.
But something about their return in the MCU just wasn't sitting right with me. It just felt wrong and like something was out of place. And it reminded me of this movie called The Mandela Effect, where essentially we see this guy find out that we're all living in a simulation, and he uses like this supercomputer to make a deal with the program itself to undo his daughter's death. And at first everything's fine, the kid is back, happy day, but the return of his dead daughter results in his wife beginning to lose her mind because something in the code just feels off, and the whole system winds up becoming corrupted because something that isn't supposed to be there now is there, and it's just not the same as it was, and it brings the whole thing crashing down. And I tell you all of that because that's kind of how I felt watching Kingpin and Hawkeye, and to a lesser extent seeing Daredevil and She-Hulk. I was elated that these guys were back and being portrayed by the same actors from that original show, but something just felt off. A lot of their past was being ignored, and key characters were just missing, and Matt and Kingpin kind of felt like they just spawned into the MCU for the sake of being there. And the reason it feels that way is because originally that was the plan. There was no plan to include anyone or anything beyond that of Daredevil and Kingpin being portrayed by Cox and D'Onofrio. And that just doesn't work. You can't bring these actors back to play these characters without bringing back the history and the other characters that made that story work. And that's when I realized that while Daredevil and Kingpin are of course the most crucial part of that series, and they're the main main thing that makes that series so great, but supporting characters like Foggy, Karen, and Punisher are also just as crucial to making that show work. And so when you try to recreate that magic by bringing back Matt and Kingpin, but you ignore all of the stuff that came before, it feels cool to have these two characters back, but it also feels wrong because something is just off about it. So I tell you all that because I am really glad that Marvel did end up correcting course about midway through production of Born Again, and they did decide to embrace the past and make this show a true continuation of the original, not just some loose adaptation with faint connections here and there. But unfortunately, you can still feel that other show in the bones of this show. You can feel the cuts, the rewrites, the tone shifts. You can see that other show within this show, and that's what makes it very inconsistent and sloppy. But seeing the good stuff mixed in with it does make me very optimistic for season 2. All right, well, now I am joined by my two friends, Lee Mazzio and Ethan Ing. Guys, I want to get your thoughts on this series finale, or season finale rather, and just the series as a whole. Lee, you and I are simpatico when it comes to our disdain for how this show looks from a color correction perspective, lighting perspective, camera work perspective. I don't want to go on too long about it, but what were your general thoughts on the finale? Did they improve on that at all? And just general thoughts on the season as a whole?
Yeah, for sure. I'll go finale first because my thoughts on the season are long, but I do think that the last two episodes, 8 and 9, were not great by any means, in my opinion, but were standouts of the show, and they were the secondary team, and Benson and Moorhead, did Loki Season 2, which I think should be the pinnacle for, all Marvel shows, how they want to look. I do think that's the best thing that has come out of Marvel. And so I do think, visually speaking, this finale and the episode before the finale were some of the best work we've seen in Daredevil Born Again. Writing-wise, I'm not impressed. I think that I was hearing a lot of everyone being like, oh, the twist is so intriguing, and, it came out of nowhere, and, this is an insane setup for Season 2, but that is all it felt like. It only felt like a setup for Season 2. None of the characters that were set up this season meant anything to the story other than let's get Matt and let's get Fisk in these places for Season 2. And I just feel like even the cool parts of the gore in the finale, which I will concede I did quite like, don't really add up to, a fruitful story to me. I don't feel like I was watching the finale, and when those moments came up, I wasn't like, hell yeah, this is Daredevil. I was like, all right, Disney's getting a little freaky with it. And that's all it kind of did for me.
Well, and it's because... Look, I know we talked about when they announced Born Again, oh, I hope they don't Disneyfy it and take away all the grit and the gore and stuff. It kind of feels like they still did have that Disney Plus Marvel show DNA to it, and then they just said, but let's add some blood. That's not how that's not what we meant when we said we wanted a course correction. Ethan, you're a little different. You enjoyed the show. You binged it, right? You didn't watch it like we did, week by week. You actually binged this whole thing. I'm actually kind of curious if my perception of the show would be different had I binged it as well, because I did binge the first 3 seasons because that's how they dropped on Netflix. What were your general thoughts on the series and this finale?
So I came on to the talkback, which was a great video, by the way, that first scene saving the show. And at that point, I had just finished the whole show. I binged it in about 2 days. And I do agree. I find the week to week basis very different. Sorry if I'm veering off the question a little bit, but I did think when I finished it, I was like, the week-to-week experience on this show is definitely going to be very odd. Going from episode 8 to 9, the cliffhanger that they leave you on there, I thought was going to be very weird. Working on the breakdowns week by week, I did come to be like, okay, so this Muse storyline was nowhere near as good as I thought it was when I had watched it, when I watched all those episodes together for the first time, compared to waiting, every week for it. I agree on the, writing stuff of, with Lee about episode 8 and 9 being like, oh, really what this is just set up for season 2. But I disagree on like, I did pop off a couple of times of like, oh, this is Daredevil, of like, especially the Punisher and Daredevil fight in the finale, and then when Karen came back up and the theme played, like, maybe call me easily impressed, but I was like, oh my god, this, like, when the theme started playing, I, like, screamed. But yeah, I think, and maybe this is my, like, being too inside baseball, but they had announced this season with 18 episodes, and then we got 9. So I came into the show expecting for the finale to be like, this is going to be a cliffhanger. This is going to be a drop-off. And I feel like that affected my viewing experience of it a lot, which I'm not, like, defending the show about. I think that's, like, in general, a lot of people will come into this and feel maybe a little, like, disappointed that we're not seeing, like, the confrontation in this finale. But overall, I liked it. It's just, man, I don't know what that early team was doing and how that, like, compares to the first 3 seasons of Daredevil, like, in the slightest.
I enjoyed it. Like, there were a lot of moments throughout the series that I was really enjoying, like, especially in those first 2 episodes and in these last 2 episodes. I think the middle is really where it kind of dipped in quality for me. But of course, there were plenty of moments throughout the season that I was like, yes, let's go. Especially all of the stuff with the Punisher. I'm really glad that they decided to bring Bernthal back in, and I'm glad that he turned it down originally because he didn't like where they were going with it. But then they changed it, I guess, and pitched it to him again. He came back. I really liked what they did there. You know, I won't go on too much about how ugly it is. I'm gonna, Lee, you're gonna be editing this probably. I would just love for you to put up some great side by sides of what we mean when we say.
I have them locked in.
All right, sounds great. But the other problem was the show just felt kind of clunky and poorly weighted. But to your point, Ethan, you know, sometimes I wonder if, with this being my job, am I over analyzing? Like, I try to think, okay, if I was still a security guard at a candy factory and I just got home and I'm just trying to, you know, relax and watch some Daredevil, would I think differently? Would I just sit back and watch it, relax and enjoy it? Am I being too, like, over analytical? And I think that is totally a possibility, but you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with us taking a little time to dissect a show. That is what people are here for. Okay, so then bringing back the Punisher I thought was great. Another character that I really wish they had brought back was Mahoney from the original series. I think that his character should have taken the place of Cherry and of the police chief. I think that bring in Mahoney and have him fill in that role, because something that this show was lacking, and Ryan has talked about this in other videos, is a supporting cast. I don't want to sound like this whiny guy who's like, oh, I want Karen and Foggy back. I want the original. No, I'm all for new stuff. But as I mentioned earlier in the video, that scene in like the middle of the season where Matt says this just all feels fake, I felt that, man, because it does, especially when you watch this finale and Punisher's there, Karen's there. I'm like, this is the show. Lee, what do you think? Am I off base on that? Would you have liked to have seen Mahoney?
Of course, and I do think that, like, my main praise for this show is the way that it focused on Matt and Fisk being a mirror of each other, but I do think that because of that, we weren't able to get any other characters. And I think if we were to bring in characters like Mahoney, like they did with Karen and Foggy, who already have 3 seasons established of their characterizations, we would be able to feel more connected with the story. Like, I don't even know if my love for the Matt and Fisk comparison is just because I knew them for 3 seasons, or if because that was established well in this show. And it's like the whole show felt like they were trying to get us to know these characters while also we already had to know them, kind of. Like the first episode with Cherry and, I'm forgetting her name, but the other cop in the bar, and how they're part of the gang for some reason, but we've never met them, ever. And it just felt very like they needed to continue Matt and Fisk's story. Let's throw in some props for them, not flesh out any of them, but they're still going to aid to the story somehow.
Okay. We did that breakdown of the first episode where I talked about how this episode saved the series. They reworked a lot of stuff. One thing that I'll commend them on it being clever, but also I hate it and it irritates me, is how they were like, oh, we want to make the audience accept these new characters that have really no background and we haven't done a good job at making people actually care about them. So what we'll do is we'll put them in Josie's and we'll have them interact with Karen and Foggy. That'll make it work, right? No. Ethan, what'd you think? Did you miss Mahoney?
So, of course I missed Mahoney. He was such a, great, integral part to the show, originally, the original season.
And he had a connection to Foggy. That would have been great.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I saw this online, and I'm saying this so that people don't misconstrue this as my original thought, but, could you imagine how hard that episode 1 reveal would have hit if it was Mahoney finding out that Matt was Daredevil on top of that rooftop? How many layers of oh my god, I've known Mahoney was tied to both the lawyer side and the Daredevil side of the original show so integrally, and I just I do miss him, and I hope that season 2 brings Brett Mahoney's character back. But I'll say that I think one of the few people who started the show kind of being okay with Cherry. This is a character that, yes, we haven't seen all of the scenes that he has grown close with Matt and Foggy, but I understood that they were going to make more connections during their time as Nelson, Murdock, and Paige. I just wish we would have seen some of that. So I was okay with Cherry until around episode 6 and 7, where I genuinely think the show that's the low point of the show, where Cherry is just there to be I think Brian pointed out in our breakdown, he's just there filling in Foggy's role from the original show of being hey, you shouldn't be Daredevil again. It's just quite literally a plot device instead of a character, which sucks. But yeah, I thought he was okay at the start.
I get the argument that people have made, and I've even made this argument as a devil's advocate kind of thing to myself, because that's what I do. I'll sit here at my desk and literally argue with myself because I'm sick. But anyway, I have questioned myself about, well, they've already done 3 seasons of, Karen, Foggy, the whole thing with, Matt and being Daredevil and the dangers of it. So I get if you don't want to retread all that, but don't just retread it with different characters and try to pretend like you're doing something new. If you're going to retread it, then retread it, actually build upon what you've had before. And, you mentioned Mahoney maybe coming back in season 2. I guess the police chief role is open, so maybe we could see Mahoney come back into that role and serve as a big obstacle to
I'd
Fisk.
be so down. The new team, I almost, okay, and this is me being headcanon, I don't know anything, right? But if the new team came in and saw that Cherry was already here, that's why they put him in episode 1, I would be so okay with, okay, now they get the season 2 is just them. There's no episodes that they have to work into their episode 1, 8, and 9. Bring back some of the other characters. That, I will say, to Lee's point earlier of do I like the Matt and Kingpin stuff because we had 3 seasons of television with them? That also made it so that any time they tried to call back to that original show, I would immediately think where's Claire? Where's Matt's mom? Where's Melvin? Where are all these characters? And that's probably just me being a super fan, but at the same time, I do wonder what happened to that original cast and how much of that is wanting to bring them back, or how much of that do they actually have an answer to?
No, it feels like watching a sitcom and all of a sudden half the cast is gone. It feels weird. It's like when Michael leaves the office. There's nothing fun about it. Speaking of Mahoney replacing the police chief, I want to talk about why that might happen. We saw Kingpin crush this guy's skull with his bare hands. And, I actually kind of liked how they did it, because it would have been goofy if he was holding the guy's head and it literally smashed between his hands. They instead did this thing where the jaw ripped and then he twisted up his temple a little more realistic, kind of dialing back Kingpin a little bit. We don't have him ripping doors off cars anymore. Lee, one, do you think they're they're ever going to address the fact that he ripped a car door off. And are you glad that for this series and perhaps for the continuation of his character in the MCU, they dialed that back just a little bit? Do you think they're walking that line right?
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever get the car door addressed. Because I don't know if they're going back and watching other shows before they write them.
Do you know what we're doing in WandaVision? Have you seen it? And no, they had not.
But I do really enjoy where they're going with Kingpin, and I think that this still physically threatened, like obviously physically threatening, he killed a man with his bare hands. I like him more on this like political threat, more threat to the people as an idea rather than a like physically scary person. I think that my favorite scenes with Fisk in this show were the ones where he was at his desk being threatening to the people on the other side of his desk. Like anytime he was with Sheila, I was getting anxious for her, and he's not even physically threatening her. And so I do think that the shift they're taking with Fisk works really well for his character, but obviously no more car doors, but I like that they can still nod that he might not be...
I'm fine with him utilizing car doors, just not ripping them off. If he wants to smash somebody's head in with a car door, I'm there all day.
That's completely fine. Yeah, that's my mayor. But no, I do think that the way that they're going with him is really interesting because majority of his he's the Kingpin is because he's so big. And so to have D'Onofrio, who I think slimmed down for this season, or who's slowly gaining back that weight as we've seen later, I don't know. I think it's a very interesting turn with him. I like it.
Were you disappointed that we didn't get to see him and Matt go at it physically? Like, would you have liked to have seen a fight?
I don't know if I needed a fight this season. I think that it wouldn't have worked plot-wise with him being the mayor. I feel like a physical fight might be a little bad for the campaign, personally. But I do wish we had a better scene of Matt and Fisk than we did in the diner. And that's what I'll say.
They just felt so disjointed. It felt like two completely separate things were going on. I mean, I feel like in the original, the presence of Kingpin was always lingering, even when he wasn't in the scene. And then vice versa as well, the presence of Daredevil and the threat of not only, the physical threat of Daredevil, but also what Matt and Foggy and Karen were doing with trying to bring down Kingpin. Kingpin felt that threat in all of his scenes. They felt like they were there, like haunting one another. And I didn't really get that with this season.
I will say, in the first season, he didn't even appear until episode 3. And I think that aided in Kingpin being this Kingpin monster type figure, because we didn't really know who he was. We didn't know visually who he was until we saw him in episode 3. And him looking at Rabbit at a snowstorm is so, such a shift to how we perceived him in our mind. And so I think that you're not really ever going to get as well of a Kingpin setup as we did in season 1. Especially coming off the heels of everything that went down with him in season 3, and then him getting out of jail and everything that went down in Echo and all of that. But yeah.
Look, it does become difficult to reinvent the wheel, so many times. They've already told so much of this story. That's why I was totally fine with the idea of them doing something new, doing something fresh. But I think the way that they handled it was just too convoluted. I'm hesitant to say that I would have rather had a consistent show like the previous way they planned on doing it. As long as, even if I wouldn't have liked that direction, at least it would have felt consistent. But I am glad that they did that reshift, and that means that season 2 will actually probably feel the way I'm wanting it to feel, but also have that consistency. Before we go, and I do want to share my thoughts on why I'm optimistic for season 2. Ethan, you had mentioned, I guess, like a fan theory that you're seeing going around regarding Foggy. I thought we would come full circle with that first video we did, talking about how Foggy's death kind of saved the show. Can you share that theory again with Lee and I?
So, there's been a popular fan theory going around that Foggy isn't dead and he's actually in witness protection. It's taken from the comics where a very similar situation happens. Like, the cliff notes are Vanessa is the one behind the attack, and Foggy is killed, but next issue it's revealed that he's in witness protection. And me personally, I really don't like this theory. And it's not because I don't love Foggy. He is the heart and soul of that original show.
It's because you do love Foggy. Yeah.
I mean, I think, Colton, you said it in that first video to bring it full back. Like, we've explored a lot of what Foggy is in this universe, and for what Born Again, like, gets wrong, what it does get right, I feel like, is the characterization of what would happen to Matt Murdock if Foggy's death was on him. And if they just suddenly revealed in season 2 that, oh, Foggy wasn't actually dead, he was alive this whole time, I would cry over that reunion. But I wouldn't like we just wasted Born Again's, like, even more than what it kind of already feels like a waste, with Muse and everything, which I'm sure they're gonna also course correct, but, like,
is that when we get the Inhuman announcement for Muse?
Honestly, like, make him a mutant, play that X-Men theme, like, I don't care. There's also, like, a weird storyline where he goes to hell. I don't care. Give him his powers. We've dealt with, like, mystical hand ninjas, so honestly, the explanation of how we get there is already, like, I don't really mind it as much, mainly because the bar is so low. Like, they just made this, like, cool-ass, like, complete counter to Daredevil, like some whiny Taekwondo kid. I have so many problems with that. But anyway, all that to say, I don't want Foggy to come back, because I think it would really undercut what Matt did this season.
I agree. I would hate it. And I love the character of Foggy, but if we learn that, I mean, Matt heard his heart stop. I don't want to learn that he was later resuscitated and then put into witness protection. You know, I didn't really care for the fact that they did that in Captain America Winter Soldier with Nick Fury. I think it's just kind of, it's cheap. You know,
there needs to be some stakes, you know?
Yeah, it's them trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're trying to have that emotional impact while simultaneously not having to get rid of the character. I almost think that I would be more welcoming of, like, after Secret Wars, when the multiverse is reset, maybe then he's back. But even that is...
I mean, Marvel doesn't seem to have a problem with bringing back dead characters as of late. So, you never know.
They seem to have zero problem with it whatsoever. Well, guys, I want to thank you both so much for joining me. It has been a blast talking Born Again with you guys all season, and I'm glad we got to have a little conversation here for the finale. And I am excited for season 2, and I want to tell you guys why. So, look, overall, I did like this show. I just didn't love it. And hey, that's okay. And if you did love it, I am so glad. But for me, it was just lacking in several areas. But if the good parts of this show that came after the reshuffling are any indication for the future, which they clearly are, I can safely say that I am super optimistic about the second season. Really, my only worry is that they could still fall victim to the in-house visual style that Marvel seems to have when it comes to a lot of their shows that go up on Disney+, which for the most part is this muted, ugly, boring look that just pales in comparison to the original show that was so vibrant and had great contrast and saturation. But hey, that's enough out of me. I want to hear your thoughts on this finale and the series overall. And let me know if you're as pumped for season 2 as I am. Hey, and by the way, be sure to check out our merch store, ScreenCrushMerch.com, where we have lots of great Daredevil Born Again inspired parody merch. We've got the Nelson and Murdock Law and Order shirt, the hallway fight, the Return of the King, and many, many more. Shopping our merch store is the best way to support our channel so that we can keep making videos just like this one. If you're new here, please do feel free to subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Colton Ogburn.